Fed Talk at the PILG. This is Fed Talk at the PILG, a friendly conversation on anything and everything federalism with our host, Attorney Gwendolyn Pimentel Gana. This podcast is brought to you by Pimentel Institute for Leadership and Governance and Hans Seidel Foundation, Philippines.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to PILG's Governance Podcast. I'm Gwen Pimentel Gana, your host. As we near the elections, it is important that we engage the electorate, especially the youth, in meaningful discussions on how important a vote is and its impact on the future of our country. Today, we have a discussant, a youth leader, who has taken the challenge of actively participating in the electoral process through innovative ways to encourage the youth to be involved in these midterm elections. Isaiah Crisanto is the Executive Director of the Philippine Institute for Student Democracy. Thank you for being here with us, Isaiah. How are you?
Thank you so much, po. I'm very happy to be here a day after the People Power Revolution 39th anniversary.
Yes, that was such a very important event in our history, and I'm glad that we were able to celebrate it. Okay, and Isaiah, can you tell us a little something about the Philippine Institute for Student Democracy?
So here at the Philippine Institute for Student Democracy, we're a newly set up NGO. We're a non-profit, non-partisan, uh, non-government research institute dedicated to advancing and promoting student democracy as a fundamental component for nation building. Um, Primarily, we conduct research on what we believe to be the four pillars of student democracy, which are student governments, the student press, electoral boards, and then student organizations.
I'm sure that everyone is excited to hear your views on the importance of the youth's participation in these midterm elections. So let us jump right into this topic of ours. No, is there such a thing as a youth vote? And if yes, why is it important, Isaiah?
Oh, thank you so much, Ms. Gwen. That question has been going viral recently on Facebook, with some asserting that there is no such thing as a youth vote. I think if we are to be very specific about it, I don't believe there is any sort of block youth voting. I believe the youth of today are quite, just like the rest of society, are quite divided, are quite polarized. However, there is certainly a youth vote. What do I mean by a youth
Mm.
vote? A youth vote can be seen more as an attitude, as a behavior, as a belief, rather than a single block vote. I believe as young people, the youth has an opportunity to look at decisions in a forward looking lens. We don't look
Mm.
so much at decisions at how they've impacted us in the past, given that due to the nature of being a youth, you haven't experienced much in life. Many of what we do is actually forward thinking. And what I've mentioned in the past is that youth, when they vote, they have the opportunity to be more idealistic, to be more hopeful for election.
Mm.
Now, what
Mm.
we're seeing as a struggle is many students in today's society are becoming quite apathetic. Uh,
Mm.
in UP Diliman alone, voter turnout over the last 3 years has dropped down to 8%, and it
Mhm.
doesn't go past 30%. And so we see this kind of apathy or rejection of the status quo to be an opportunity naman instead of something uh, um, to be depressed about. We believe that this represents an opportunity for leaders to engage the youth and to spark hope for them again. So
Mm.
to summarize, I don't believe there is such a thing as a block youth vote, but there is certainly a youth vote, and that is the spirit that every youth carries with their hope for the future.
Oh, well, I believe so too. I agree with you. In the Philippines, it's difficult actually to define block voting, no? I think it's difficult because we are so concerned about, personalities. So sometimes we have difference in terms of actually appreciating a candidate. So I don't think we can really go into this black voting. But you mentioned about youth apathy. No, what do you think is the real reason why students feel discouraged or disconnected from the midterm elections? I mean, in terms of participating, how do we now strategize to make them feel that their vote truly matters?
Um, in terms of asking about why there is voter apathy, the Institute is actually engaging different schools and institutions to conduct research within their schools. We'd like to ask directly young student voters, why is it that they engage or choose not to engage? But on an anecdotal point of view,
Mm-hmm.
many of what we've been hearing from our school partners and students is that they don't see it to be relevant to them and they don't see the
Mm-hmm.
buy-in factor. So
Mm-hmm.
what do we mean when we say buy-in factor? A lot of students, when they vote, they have a question of what's in it for me? How do I benefit from this? And ultimately, it's also a question of good representation. If we look at the Senate today, majority of our senators are above 60, are above 50. They're pushing into their retirement ages. And so for the youth, a lot of us, we cannot see representatives who truly look like us, who represent us. In the concept of representational democracy, we want to vote people who are like us, who will represent us. And so part of the challenge in engaging our youth voters is the fact that our choices are not that diverse. We deal with a lot of political dynasties, as you mentioned, celebrity politics. Um, Many youth don't see candidates who look like them and who reflect their values. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the main challenges that we face when trying to get students engaged in elections. Second
Mm-hmm.
point would be the lack of education, the lack of proper education when it comes to our electoral politics. Uh, it is not taught in schools. We're not taught universally how the government works or even what a senator or a congressman truly does. And so when you ask a student to make a decision who they think a senator should be, they don't even understand what the job entails. They're not even aware of the job description for a
Mm-hmm.
senator. And so that would really be challenging for you to then engage them to come out and vote this midterm election.
You mentioned about the youth not feeling engaged because they do not see themselves as part of the electoral process or being truly represented by the candidates there, or even those who have been elected in office. And you mentioned the Senate, that they're about in their 50s and 60s already. But of course, we know that 35 is the qualifying age, no, to be voted in to the Senate. But it is important for the youth. Don't you agree that you should start with engaging in the electoral process in positions that you are qualified to engage in or to be voted to? Like example, the barangay. I think the youth. It's very important that youth should see the importance of the barangay, that it is a chance where you can involve yourselves really, no, in I mean, that's a person to person relationship, and it's easier to get voted into that the barangay council because your neighbors are going to be voting for you, no? So I think you are in the on the right track of saying that you should engage your fellow youth or your peers to really be involved in governance by actually participating and actively get yourselves involved there and be voted on, and not just criticize or feel, as you said, depressed that you're not part of the system. But I really also agree that in terms of education, yes, we should inform not only the youth but the voters. What are the job descriptions of these people that we're voting into power? Actually, totoo yan. We don't know. A senator, is it easy to be a senator? What's your job? Diba? It's not. Honestly,
Yes,
no, if
yes.
you're, yeah. I mean, not just anybody can be a senator, for one. If you're really if you really know what it is to be a senator. Anyway, uh, you're doing your
And
job there,
if
diba?
if I may add to that, the
Yes.
COMELEC does not refer to the midterm simply as a midterm. It refers to it as an NLE, or national and local elections. I wholly agree with you that for the youth, it would be, I not necessarily more prudent, but it would be more exciting for me to see the youth really engage in the local part of our elections.
Yeah.
We've been seeing a lot of new SKs coming up and about, and they are trying new things. They are trying new innovations. And with the SK reform law, there is hope that more youth can be engaged. At the lower levels, though, when we look at the barangay level, when we talk about SK, for example, there are still many challenges for SKs. For example, in one university we were speaking with, SKs had problems getting permission to leave classes, despite it being in the law and despite
Mm.
PILG providing certification. They felt it difficult to leave their class to attend the SK meetings. Second, that we found among college students, many students are not studying in their barangays. And so when we talk to
Mm.
student governments like the Ateneo Sangguniang, they told us the challenge is that the students studying or even at the dorms in the university are not registered in the barangay that affects them the most, which is in their school, because they come from the province, they come from somewhere else. And so the challenge also right now is that SKs are, especially when we talk about college or university, are not necessarily studying in their home barangays, since not every
Mm.
barangay has a state college or a university. And so these are things that perhaps we can conduct further research into, and really investigate what are the barriers to participation for our youth, and how can we help them really achieve, full participation and engage with the local election.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good point you stated, Isaiah. I think moving forward, that's a very good study that the Philippine Institute for Student Democracy can engage in. No? So you can do some research on that, because I think legislation must be amended, what we have now, or we can have new legislations for these particular concerns. No, and Isaiah, the youth is very much into social media, and our elections has actually changed because of social media, no? What is the role of social media in student lives that can help, make them more aware, or can make first time voters really find it important to vote? How do we tap social media?
Actually, Miss Gwen, I think it's not a question of what role does social media play in the young person's life, but what role does the youth play in social media? Because the fact of the matter is, for many youth, social media is our life.
Oh.
Um, Studies
Yeah.
show that students are spending 6 to 8 hours, even 10 hours. Yeah, I frequently look at my digital well-being score and see that in some days I spend 13 hours in front of the screen. And so, what I mentioned, for most young people today, the reality is that social media is no longer our escape from reality. In fact, you'll see a lot of young people posting they want to take a social media detox, they want to get off social media for a while, because what has happened is that our public spaces, our town halls, have shifted to digital. And so, in fact, for young students, the digital world is their life, and
Oh.
the physical world is an escape from that digital world. And so the way we see that social media can be really used for good would be to engage youth in genuine conversation. And so we've seen different student communities pop up. I'm part of several. For example, there is one student community of student journalists, so press. They have more than 90,000 members on Facebook. And what they do all day is they share tips for becoming a better student journalist, a photojournalist. They share their school student publications. And so these are what we call online communities. And they are the communities that we should build. What we have to realize is that we cannot be passive consumers of social media. We have to move away from simply passive consumption to active engagement. And for the youth to do that, it can start small in group chats, in Facebook groups, in communities where they can share. Um, and what I find very exciting is to see peer learning and peer teaching, where you have students teaching other students. So you can see there are communities online of student leaders, of SK federations, and the ones giving advice and the ones conducting the training are not experts, but fellow students as well. And so uh, I think those things are the way that we can really engage the youth, building online communities and encouraging peer learning and peer teaching.
Mm-hmm. But of course, that's very good. And I'm glad to know that there are these platforms now that really gather youth in a conversation. No? But what we are fearing is, of course, misinformation and, false news, etc. How can we help students navigate the noise and find the resources that will give them the confidence in making informed decisions, considering the climate that we have about misinformation and, of course, fake news? How do we do this, Isaiah?
It is quite a challenging problem. In fact, some people are considering disinformation to be almost a wicked problem already, one that is so interconnected with other problems that it is hard to solve on its own. The fact of the matter is the Philippines is in an education crisis. We have the EDCOM 2 report said that less than half of our schools have public elementary schools have principals. Our state universities and colleges routinely get budget cuts. And so we must look at this information not in a vacuum, but also in the broader context of our educational system. Now, that being said, what are some specific things that educators, leaders, and students can do? Number one is to really raise the media information literacy and critical digital technology literacy. So we're very happy that MIL is now being taught in senior high schools, but it's not enough. MIL is only taught for a few quarters, and the topics there we believe should be started at the grade school level, not anymore at the senior high school level. Since we're seeing
Mm,
children as young as 6 or 5 already on social
mm,
media, and so if we teach them critical digital literacy and media information literacy when they're already 16, 17, it may already be too late because they've already
uh-huh.
been on the internet for a decade. And so what we need to do is bring media information literacy down in our education. We have to teach it sooner and earlier,
Yeah.
and we have to make it more comprehensive. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing that we've seen is that while social media has been a democratizing tool by removing the gatekeepers, it's also
Mm,
allowed the proliferation of trolls and of
mm-hmm.
bloggers who don't really respect the truth. But what we've seen is that there's also a counterpoint. There are efforts by young students, bloggers, to fight against this disinformation. And what is really important is that information has to build a shared reality. The problem with social media is that it can create disparate realities between our students because we each have our own feed, or as the young people say today, FYP, which is your For You page on TikTok. Each of us sees the world differently because it is fed to us through these algorithms. And so, what is important for students is not to get caught up in their own personal feed, but to create a shared reality with their fellow students. How can this happen? This can happen in our schools, through our teachers, and also through our student publications, where they can provide a more broad and shared view of the world instead of simply what we see on our individual feeds. But
Mm.
it's hard. I will admit that there are times that I get very hopeful on social media, only to look at my friend's cell phone and realize that he is not seeing the same things I'm seeing. And
Mm-hmm.
so, one helpful thing that every student can do is to share responsibly, not just to share whatever is the most exciting or what's going viral, but to share something interesting. And when we do that sharing, hindi lang po tayo dapat mag-click share. When we share it, let's add to the conversation. Let's add our thoughts. So often on Facebook, when we click share, there's an opportunity for us to write. I encourage students to write the reaction, to write their thoughts, to write their opinions on the news article, on the issues that they are sharing. In this way, we can spark and move more conversations among our young students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you believe in fact checking before you share?
Okay, so that is a very difficult question. I was actually very fortunate to attend the first fact checking summit almost 2 years ago at the University of Santo Tomas. And the reality of the matter is that fact checking is always going to be a catch up game. We are always on the defensive. And the problem with centralizing fact checking is that it is just so much easier to make fake news than it is to check. The resources to fact check one lie cost so much more than it does to generate one lie. Now, where we push back on this is on the technology companies. I spoke to a member of Congress before where they were blaming Facebook for the spread of disinformation. However, when I pointed out to them, the only reason Facebook was able to penetrate so many students is because Globe offers Facebook for free. And yet, Globe
Mm,
does not offer access to Google or Wikipedia for free. So, in the matter of economics, it literally costs students load, it costs them data to fact check something, whereas it is free to share a lie.
yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
we actually need to look into the economics of these social media platforms and the telcos. For
Mm-hmm.
example, what is something that the telcos could do? If they could give uh, additional load to students or data for them to be able to fact check, then we can reduce the cost it would take to fact
Mm-hmm.
check something. When we talk about fact checking, when we talk about how lies are free and facts cost money, we have to really scale up. And one of the things that the institute is investigating as a possible way to scale up is introducing fact checking positions to all student publications. Um, just for context, when I spoke to the Secretary General of the College Editors Guild of the Philippines, they mentioned that pre pandemic, they had 800 member student publications. But then in 2024, when I spoke to them, they had dropped to 300 member student publications. That means in the span of just 3 years during the pandemic and during the previous administration, almost 500 student publications were wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and under the Campus Journalism Act of 1991, we actually have a law that provides for every school to have a dedicated student publication. And so this is
Mm-hmm.
something that we're actually actively calling student publications to implement is to create dedicated fact-checking positions in their organizations and train that. If imagine if we were able to introduce fact-checking positions to student publications as early as elementary school, all the way up to
Mm-hmm.
college. That would mean currently, students can gain expertise in a certain field of student journalism. Maybe they want
Mm-hmm.
to be a really good photojournalist. They can do that for almost 10 years. From their grade school to high
Yeah.
school to college, they can
Mm-hmm.
really develop a proficiency. And when we do that, if we introduce fact checking, then they can also develop a proficiency there and we can generate more fact checkers because
Mm-hmm.
it's not just the schools who need it. Companies are hiring fact checkers. Media
Mm-hmm.
organizations hire fact checkers.
Mm-hmm.
NGOs hire fact checkers.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to increase the pool, the total number of fact
Mm-hmm.
checkers we have in the Philippines just to meet our demand. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the innovative ways that PISC is thinking about fact checking and
Mm-hmm.
disinformation.
Yes, that's a very good thing. And I think that, as youth leaders, you can actually promote this particular practice and call on all our, media institutions to really put serious thought into making sure that there are this fact checking. So going back, Isaiah, to, student voters and first time voters and, the midterm elections. So it's very important that you said, as we've been discussing, that facts must be checked, if they're correct or not, because I'm sure a lot of misinformation and disinformation will be going around because of the elections. No, I think what you said earlier about critical media literacy is very important. No, and I think that's the way we should start. As in, every individual must have that in them to start thinking about, is this real or not? And you said that there are signs of the youth going towards this particular train of thought, that they are not just accepting everything, that they see or hear in social media, or even read in social media. So do you think that as first time voters, we can actually engage them in this kind of discourse? How do we do this to the
Yes,
first time vote?
civil society, our professionals, to engage students in interactive workshops. What do we mean by interactive? Let them actually try it. Show them two news articles, one that's been modified and one that's not, and ask them to determine the difference there. Don't simply tell them that this is what's wrong. If you tell them this is how you can spot an AI generated image, let them try. Tell them to look for examples in their local governments. We've been seeing increasing reports of local governments creating fake news, creating fake accounts, and for students to be involved at that early stage would help them get real world experience when it comes to seeing it in the future. One thing that we hope to achieve with this kind of critical digital literacy and media information literacy is that students say the phrase, "Oh, I saw that in class. Oh, I learned about that in school." So that when they see a problem in the real world, they can connect it back to their education. They can connect it back to the lessons that they're learning. And hopefully, uh, and this will take time, but we can raise the overall media information literacy. I believe as an institute, we should also be tracking the level of media information literacy with objective metrics so that we can provide this back to our administrators, back to our curriculum developers, back to DepEd, back to CHED, so that we can inform how to create better MIL programs.
So, Isaiah, how do we then use all this knowledge and information in actually inspiring first time voters to really come out and vote? And how do we use this information to engage them in casting their votes and making sure that they don't feel like left out, or that they don't find their vote to be useless in the midterm elections?
Yes, Ma'am Gwen, thank you so much. First time student voters is how we define the main thrust of our first time voter, student voter education program. We believe the primary way to reach them is still through education and awareness. And for first time student voters, the challenge is immense. I often liken it to learning calculus without having first taken algebra, trigonometry, or even basic arithmetic. And whenever I share this to educators, they're always caught in deep thought when I explain how we are teaching civics education and voting. We start students with 1 plus 1. After we get 1 plus 1, we go to 2 plus 2, and then 2 times 2, 2 divide. Once we're done with arithmetic, we move up to algebra, trigonometry, and then calculus. What is happening is we are giving our students an equivalent of a calculus exam when they have not yet even learned any of the basics, learned any of the fundamentals. And so our approach to voter education should not simply be on the 2 years before they are able to vote, but in the long run down, teaching all
Mm-hmm.
the way to kindergarten, grade school. And you don't need to teach them everything all at once. You can
Mm-hmm.
build it up. You have to ladderize
Correct.
that kind of
Yeah.
education. And so
Mhm.
when I tell people this, it's like taking a calculus exam that you did not study for, you don't know. It's no wonder that we are failing in our elections to choose good leaders, to choose the right candidates, because we haven't studied for it. We haven't been prepared adequately for it. And we're
Correct.
being given everything at the last minute. And so,
Mm-hmm.
what we're also calling on COMELEC and we're also calling on our civil society is that start voter education earlier, not simply at 16, 17 when they're right about to vote. Start it even younger. You can start
Yeah.
with the basic concept of why do we vote?
Mm.
This kind of approach, we need to start voter education much earlier than just 16 or 17. And in fact, the SK has lowered the barrier for entry. You can start voting at 15 for SK. You can run for SK at 16. And so this moves the education lower.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
the second analogy I use is that one of a musician. Ma'am Gwen, do you play any instruments?
Unfortunately, no.
But if you were to play, let's say, the violin, how do you think you would go about learning how to play the violin?
Huh?
You would
Oh, of
first have
course.
to find
Yeah.
teachers, you'd
Yeah,
find
yeah, you have to
lessons,
get a teacher, of course, get your own violin, and then, practice. That's very
and
important. Yeah.
that is our core message for the Philippine Institute for Student Democracy. The only way you get good at playing an instrument is through practice.
Yeah.
And yet, our elections only come once every 3 years. So if you were to only play the violin once every 3 years, do you think that you will get very good with the violin?
Yeah.
The answer is no. You need to practice it a lot. And what we saw is that versus the 3 year gap between elections and the 6 year gap between presidential elections, students are actually voting at the student government level every
Yes.
single year. And so
Yes. Yeah.
voting every single year becomes an opportunity for you to practice your right to vote, to practice education, be done every single year during student council, student government elections. Because that is our practice for the national. It's like how if you practice, you will practice at home before you go on stage for the recital. Our
Yes.
schools can be that safe space to practice because the consequences only last a year. They don't last us 3, 6, or even decades. So, what would happen if we did that is that students would be prepared, would be more prepared, and they would have been able to practice before they ever reach our polling precincts and casting their quote unquote real ballots, their real votes. They would have already had many, many practices. And in fact,
Mm-hmm.
if you look from K to 12 plus 4 years of college, that would be 16 years of practice if
Correct.
we train them every year. At 16 years, you would be an expert already at that instrument you're playing.
Yes. What a good insight, Isaiah. And definitely, not only will you get to practice voting for 16 years, you are able now to discern who are those who are supposed to be voted into positions that matter. Like example, in grade school, a classroom president is also very important. A classroom treasurer, no? And you get to appreciate also the roles that they play at a very early age. So that's a very good insight. Now, I say I'm unfortunately we're running out of time, no. So I would like to ask you if you have any last words or message for your peers and the youth of today. What do you have to say to them? Not that you haven't said anything good; it's all good, and I think they should listen. But what do you have any last words?
Thank you, Ma'am Gwen. What I would say to students everywhere in the Philippines is that democracy is in our hands. It is our choice to choose what kind of democracy we will have tomorrow. And being the youth, it is our future that we're inheriting. It is not our children or grandchildren. It is our own future. The choices that we make today will bear the consequences 10, 20 years from now when we become of age to start running
Mm,
in these positions.
yes.
Um, what we are also calling for our first time student voters is to really look at the profile of candidates to vote not based on personality but based on stances. And we also want people, and this is one of the thrusts why we made ourselves a research institute, to make data driven decisions, to make fact
Yeah.
based decisions. Because a democracy not built on facts cannot stand. Democracy
Mhm.
at its core has to be a shared reality. We have to have a base assumption of facts before we can move forward with our society. And so until we can get to that point where we can agree on facts, we can agree on data, then it becomes very difficult for us to have a discussion. Because what happens is what you see online. I'm in my bubble, you're in your bubble, and we're spewing our assumptions about each other instead of on debating on the core issues and the facts that come out of it. So, from the Philippine Institute for Student Democracy, we ask all students to go out and vote, be responsible, and also to check with yourselves and to check with your community what kind of democracy we want to build for our country.
Okay.
Thank you very
So
much.
thank you so much, dear Isaiah. I pray that this conversation has emphasized the sacredness of the ballot and that understanding that by your vote, young voters, you can change the course of our country's history by taking part in governance, starting with your vote. So, as Isaiah said, let's all go out and vote, young voters, especially. So, again, this is Gwen Pimentel Gana wishing you a blessed day. Thank you and good day.
Good governance does not depend on the governors alone, but also on the governed.